Arab executive catches homeless African woman with her sick daughter. What happened next was emotional. In the heart of Dubai's glittering skyline, where wealth and power shine brighter than the desert sun, one man's life was about to change forever. Zaid Al-Hakim, a millionaire Arab executive known for his relentless ambition and cold precision in business, never expected that a single moment on the street would shatter his walls of pride and awaken something he thought he'd lost long ago. Late one evening, as he left his tower of glass and steel, his eyes caught sight of a young African woman huddled against a corner wall. Her clothes were torn, her face marked by exhaustion, and in her arms lay her daughter, frail and shivering with illness. Most executives would have walked past, dismissing her as invisible, part of the noise of the city. But not Zaid. For reasons he could not explain, he stopped. And in that pause, a chain of events began that would test his heart, his fortune, and everything he believed about himself. What followed was not just a story about wealth meeting poverty. It was about courage, compassion, and the discovery that true power doesn't lie in money or influence, but in the ability to change a life when it matters most. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this one straight to you. Stay until the end, because what Zaid chose to do after meeting that homeless woman and her sick child will leave you stunned, and maybe even questioning what you would have done in his place. Zaid Al-Hakim had spent the day buried in contracts, board meetings, and the endless rituals of wealth. His office tower rose a shard of glass against Dubai's skyline, a monument to his ambition. From his corner suite, the city stretched before him, a sea of luxury cars, private yachts, and neon lights flickering across the desert horizon. He told himself it was everything he had worked for, everything he needed. But that night, as the black sedan pulled away from the curb and slid into the traffic near the Burj Khalifa, something in him felt unsettled. He had won another deal, another company added to his empire. Yet, the celebration dinners, the handshakes, even the champagne had left him cold. When the car slowed at a red light near one of Dubai's older districts, his eyes drifted to the shadows at the corner of the street. At first, he thought it was just another part of the city's background, a forgotten piece of concrete beneath the glitter. But then he saw her. The woman sat on the ground, her back pressed to the wall, as if it were the only thing holding her upright. Her skin was dark, her hair tangled, her clothes worn thin from too many nights without shelter. In her arms lay a girl, no older than 6, wrapped in a tattered blanket. The child head rested limply against her chest, her face pale and glistening with fever. Something twisted in Zaid's chest. He knew the city. He knew its wealth and its cruelty. He also knew that most men like him would look away. He almost did. The light turned green. His driver pressed the accelerator, and the car rolled forward. Zaid turned his head, ready to let the shadows swallow the image. But the woman's eyes caught his, just for a second. They weren't begging eyes, not the kind he had seen countless times at fundraisers and charity events. They were eyes filled with exhaustion, but also defiance, like she was daring the world to notice her, daring someone to care. "Stop the car," Zaid said suddenly. The driver hesitated. "Sir." "Stop the car," he repeated, sharper this time. The sedan eased to the curb. Zaid stepped out, the night air warm against his face. His expensive suit seemed almost obscene as he walked toward the corner where the woman sat. She flinched when he approached, pulling the child closer, her body tensing like a shield. "I'm not here to hurt you," Zaid said, his voice softer than he expected. "What's wrong with her?" The woman's accent was heavy, her English broken but clear. "Fever. She cannot breathe well. No doctor. No money." Zaid crouched down, his polished shoes scuffing against the dust. He studied the girl, her shallow breaths, the faint wheeze with every inhale. A part of him wanted to rationalize, to remind himself that this wasn't his responsibility. He was a businessman, not a savior. Yet something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years, anchored him to the spot. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amina," she whispered. Her eyes flicked up to his face, wary, but unwilling to look away. "And hers?" "Samira." She brushed her hand against the girl's cheek, her touch trembling. "She is all I have." The child stirred weakly, murmuring something in a language Zaid didn't understand. The sound broke whatever wall he still had left. "Come with me," he said. Amina shook her head instantly. "No. No police. No trouble." Zaid frowned. "I'm not calling the police. I can help. She needs a hospital." Her grip on Samira tightened. "Hospitals want money. We have nothing." "I do," Zaid replied simply. The words hung between them. For a moment, the city around them seemed to fade. The horns, the chatter, the luxury cars speeding past. There was only this woman, her sick daughter, and a man who had spent his life building walls made of steel and glass, now kneeling in the dust with strangers. The driver stepped closer, uneasy. "Sir, perhaps this isn't safe. We don't know them." Zaid raised a hand, silencing him. His gaze never left Amina's. "You don't have to trust me, but she won't make it through the night like this. Let me take you both to the hospital." Amina hesitated, fear and hope warring across her face. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came. Finally, with a tremor in her voice, she whispered, "Why? Why you?" Zaid didn't have an answer. He only knew that walking away wasn't an option. Before he could respond, Samira coughed violently in Amina's arms, her small body convulsing with the effort. Panic spread across Amina's face, and she cried out her daughter's name. Zaid stood, urgency hardening his voice. "There's no time. Get in the car." For a moment, Amina looked like she might refuse again. But Samira's coughing grew harsher, her breath thinner. With shaking arms, Amina gathered the girl closer and rose unsteadily to her feet. Zaid stepped forward, offering his hand, not as an executive, not as a man of power, but simply as a human being. She hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. Together, they moved toward the waiting car. The driver's eyes widened as Amina climbed in, clutching Samira to her chest. Zaid slid in after them, his jaw set, his pulse racing. "Hospital," he ordered. The car pulled away from the corner of shadows, headlights slicing through the night. Zaid glanced at the woman and child beside him, their presence raw and out of place against the leather seats and polished chrome. Yet for the first time in years, he felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He didn't know yet that this decision would cost him far more than money. He didn't know yet that saving them would force him to confront not just their suffering, but his own. And he didn't know yet that this night would be the beginning of something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about power, loyalty, and love. The luxury sedan sped across Dubai's glistening streets, its headlights slicing through the late-night haze. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Zaid sat rigid, his eyes flicking between the faint city lights and the fragile child breathing unevenly in Amina's arms. Every call from Samira cut into the silence like a blade. Amina cradled her daughter as though her arms alone could protect her from the sickness creeping through her small body. Her eyes darted nervously between Zaid and the tinted windows, her jaw tight with mistrust. She had spent too long in a world where men with power were rarely saviors. And yet, here she was, in the leather-lined back seat of a millionaire's car, speeding toward an unknown fate. Zaid leaned forward, his voice steady but urgent. "Drive faster." "Yes, sir," the driver replied, pressing his foot to the accelerator. When they reached the hospital, one of the most expensive private clinics in Dubai, its glass doors opened like gates to a sanctuary of light and order. Doctors in white coats hurried across the polished marble floor. Nurses wheeled patients in gleaming stretchers. Everything here spoke of precision, of control. But the moment Zaid entered with Amina and Samira at his side, he realized that wealth did not erase the barriers between privilege and desperation. At the reception desk, the attendant, a woman with immaculate makeup and a clipped tone, glanced at Amina's torn clothes, then at the child wheezing in her arms. Her expression cooled instantly. "I'm sorry, but without insurance or documentation, we cannot admit." "She's not paying." Zaid cut in, his voice sharp enough to make the attendant flinch. He placed his black titanium credit card on the counter with deliberate force. "Put everything under my account. No restrictions. She goes in now." The attendant's eyes widened when she read the name embossed on the card. Recognition flashed across her face. Zaid Al-Hakim, one of the most powerful executives in the Gulf. Her tone shifted, suddenly deferential. "Of course, Mr. Al-Hakim. Right away." Doctors rushed forward, guiding Amina toward the emergency ward. She hesitated, her body tensing as they tried to take Samira from her arms. "No, please, I stay with her." "It's procedure," one of the nurses said gently. Zaid stepped closer. "She stays," he ordered. His gaze cut through any argument. "You will treat them with respect." The nurse nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." As they disappeared behind swinging glass doors, Zaid remained in the corridor, his pulse still pounding. For years, he had built empires through control, through power plays across boardrooms and markets. But here, in this fluorescent-lit hallway, he felt powerless. All he could do was wait. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sounds of monitors and muffled voices filtered through the doors. Every second felt like a negotiation with fate, one where even his fortune could not guarantee the outcome. Finally, the doctor emerged, removing his mask. "The girl is stable for now," he said. "Severe pneumonia. She was dehydrated and her fever dangerously high. Another night without treatment, she may not have survived." Zaid exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "And now, she needs several days of intensive care. Antibiotics, oxygen support. With proper treatment, she has a good chance." Zaid nodded, already prepared. "Do whatever it takes. Bill me directly." The doctor inclined his head respectfully and left. Through the glass partition, Zaid could see Amina sitting by Samira's bedside, her hands clasped tightly around her daughter's small fingers. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks, but her back remained straight, her posture defiant even in grief. When Zaid entered the room, she looked up, her eyes red but burning with emotion. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Why help us? You don't know us." Zaid hesitated. He could have given her 100 logical answers: charity, image, reputation. But none of those were true. What rose in his chest was something deeper, something he had buried beneath years of ruthless ambition. "Because I couldn't walk away," he said simply. Her gaze searched his, suspicious yet softened by gratitude she couldn't hide. "Men like you, they don't stop. They don't see us." "Maybe I've been blind," Zaid admitted. His eyes flicked to Samira, her fragile chest rising and falling under the mask. But not tonight. For a long time, neither spoke. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor filled the silence. At last, Amina whispered, "She's all I have. We came here with nothing. I clean when I can, beg when I must. But Samira, she deserves more." Her voice broke, and she pressed her lips against her daughter's forehead. "I thought I was losing her." Zaid felt a heaviness settle over him. He had sat in countless meetings negotiating millions, but he had never faced words so raw. Something in Amina's voice stripped him of the armor he wore daily. He saw not just a desperate mother, but a strength forged through suffering he could barely imagine. "You won't lose her," he said quietly. "Not if I can help it." The promise surprised him, but once spoken, it felt undeniable. That night, Zaid did not return to his penthouse suite overlooking the city. He stayed in the hospital, seated near the window, while Amina kept her vigil at Samira's side. Through the long hours, he watched them, mother and daughter bound together by love fierce enough to defy despair. And for the first time in years, Zaid felt his wealth stripped of meaning. What mattered was not the glass towers he owned, but the fragile life of a little girl who had nearly slipped away unseen. As dawn crept across the city, painting the sky in soft pink, Zaid stood to stretch his stiff back. Amina looked at him, exhaustion etched into her face. "You don't have to stay," she murmured. "Maybe I do," he replied. Before she could respond, the door opened. A hospital administrator stepped inside, flanked by 2 security officers. His expression was polite, but his eyes sharp. "Mr. Al-Hakim," he said, inclining his head, "there is a matter we must discuss. This woman," he gestured to Amina, "does not have legal residency. Harboring her here, even under your name, could put the hospital at risk." Amina stiffened, clutching Samira tighter. Fear flickered across her face, raw and desperate. Zaid's jaw clenched, his voice cold. You're telling me you let a child die because of paperwork. The administrator cleared his throat. Regulations must be followed, sir. Perhaps arrangements could be made to transfer her elsewhere. Elsewhere? Zaid stepped forward, his presence towering. She stays here, under my protection. If you have a problem, bring it to me. The administrator faltered under the weight of Zaid's authority, but his hesitation revealed the battle was not over, and in that moment, Zaid realized this was only the beginning. Saving Samira's life would demand more than money. It would demand a confrontation with a system built to exclude people like Amina. He turned back to her, her frightened eyes searching his. I promised you wouldn't lose her, he said softly. Now I have to keep that promise. But even as he spoke, Zaid knew forces larger than both of them were gathering, and soon he would have to decide how far he was willing to go for a woman he had just met and a child who had already changed everything. The morning after Samira was admitted, Dubai's skyline gleamed with its usual brilliance, but for Zaid al-Hakim the city felt different. He had stepped into a battle he hadn't planned for, a battle not of numbers and contracts, but human lives. When he returned from a short meeting with the hospital administrators, his phone lit up with messages. Executives from his company, journalists, even relatives. Word of his unusual act had already spread. In a city where reputation was currency, Zaid's decision to bring a homeless African woman and her sick child into one of the most exclusive hospitals was bound to raise questions. Some messages carried subtle warnings. Zaid, charity has its place, but involving yourself directly is dangerous for your image. Others were harsher. You risk being manipulated. Do you know who she really is? He shut the phone off, the weight of their voices pressing against his temples. He was used to criticism in the boardroom, but this was different. This was personal. Inside the hospital room, the world was quieter. Samira lay resting, her small body connected to tubes and monitors that blinked reassuringly. Amina sat beside her, stroking her daughter's hair with infinite patience. When Zaid entered, Amina looked up, her eyes tired but clear. She slept, she said softly. For the first time in days, she really slept. Zaid nodded, the knot in his chest easing slightly. He pulled a chair closer. She's strong, like her mother. Amina's lips curved faintly, though she shook her head. I don't feel strong. I feel afraid. Strength isn't the absence of fear, Zaid said, surprising himself. It's facing it anyway. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, broken only by Samira's steady breathing. Zaid studied Amina's face, the way hardship had carved resilience into her features, the way her eyes held both defiance and fragility. He had met countless powerful people in his life, but few had carried themselves with such quiet dignity. Later that afternoon, the hospital administrator returned, his posture stiff. Mr. al-Hakim, I must insist. We need proper documentation for the woman and child. Without it, immigration authorities may intervene. Zaid stood, his tone sharp. You will not disturb them while the child is under treatment. Sir, regulations. I'll handle the authorities, Zaid interrupted. His voice carried the authority of a man who was used to winning arguments. If they have questions, they can bring them to my office. The administrator hesitated, then bowed his head slightly. As you wish, Mr. al-Hakim. When the door closed, Amina turned to him, worry etched deep in her brow. They will take her, she whispered. They will take my Samira away. Zaid shook his head firmly. I won't allow it. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Why risk yourself? A man like you could walk away. He looked at her, the truth slipping past the walls he usually kept so high. Because walking away would mean losing more than I'm willing to lose. That evening, as the city lights flickered on beyond the window, Zaid found himself telling Amina pieces of his own story. How he'd grown up under a father who measured worth in profit margins. How his wealth had never filled the hollow spaces left by a lack of connection. I built towers, he admitted quietly, but they feel empty when no one waits inside them. Amina listened, her hand still wrapped around Samira's. Then maybe, she said softly, this is why you stopped for us. The thought lingered in his mind long after she fell into a light sleep beside her daughter. But not everyone was willing to let Zaid's choice pass quietly. The next morning, as he stepped into the hospital lobby, a small cluster of journalists pressed forward, cameras flashing. "Mr. Al-Hakim, is it true you're sheltering an undocumented woman in Al-Noor Hospital?" One shouted. Another pushed closer. "Critics say you're using this case for publicity. What do you say to that?" Zaid's jaw tightened. He was a man trained to navigate hostile negotiations. But this felt different. These weren't investors. They were vultures circling, eager to twist compassion into scandal. He raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "This is not about business. A child's life was at risk. I did what any man with the means should do. If you call that scandal, then perhaps the scandal is yours." His words rippled through the crowd, silencing some, angering others. Back upstairs, Amina had heard the commotion. When Zaid returned, her eyes were wide with fear. "They will destroy you," she said. He sat down heavily. "Let them try." Her hand brushed against his, a fleeting gesture of gratitude. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "Neither do I," he admitted. Over the following days, the bond between them deepened in subtle ways. Zaid brought meals he insisted she eat, reminding her she couldn't care for Samira if she collapsed herself. He sat with Samira during the night, so Amina could rest, humming softly when the little girl stirred. And though the world outside seemed determined to turn their story into controversy, inside that hospital room, something quiet and profound was taking root. But shadows lingered. One evening, as Zaid was leaving the hospital, a black SUV pulled up beside him. The tinted window slid down, revealing his cousin Kareem, a board member in his company. "You're playing a dangerous game," Kareem said coolly. "The shareholders are nervous. They don't want your personal distractions affecting business." "This isn't distraction," Zaid replied evenly. Kareem's smile was thin. "Then make sure it doesn't become your downfall." The SUV rolled away, leaving Zaid staring into the night, his jaw set. Back upstairs, Amina noticed the tension in his face. "More trouble?" she asked quietly. Zaid sat down, exhaling slowly. "They see you as a problem, as a weakness." Her gaze didn't waver. "Then why not let us go? We'll disappear. You can be free." He looked at her, the truth burning in his chest. "Because I don't want you to disappear." The words hung heavy in the air. Amina blinked, her lips parting in surprise. For the first time, she looked at him not just as a powerful stranger, but as a man standing at a crossroads he hadn't expected. And as the monitors beeped steadily and Samira stirred faintly in her sleep, Zaid knew the weight of his choice was only growing heavier. He had stepped out of the shadows of wealth and into something far more dangerous, something that asked not for money, but for his heart. By the fourth day, Samira's fever had begun to break, but the storm outside the hospital walls was only growing. What had started as whispers in business circles was now front-page news across Dubai. Arab executive shelters homeless African woman. Billionaire Al-Hakim risks reputation over street encounter. For Zaid, headlines had always been an ally. They had praised his mergers, his power, his empire. But now, they painted him as reckless, sentimental, a man losing control. Inside the hospital, Amina watched him read the morning paper, his jaw tightening with each word. "They twist everything," she said quietly. "They always do," Zaid replied. He folded the paper sharply and set it aside. "But it doesn't matter. Let them talk." Amina shook her head. "It matters. To men like you, it always matters." Her gaze fell to Samira, asleep under the blanket. "I don't want to be the reason they come for you." Zaid turned to her, his eyes hard. "You're not the reason. Their greed is." But before he could say more, the door opened. A group of men in suits entered, 2 hospital administrators, an immigration officer, and, trailing behind them, Kareem. His cousin's expression was polished, but Zaid knew that smirk. "Mr. Al-Hakim," the officer said formally, "this woman has no documentation. We must take her into custody until her status is resolved." Amina froze, clutching Samira's hand instinctively. Her eyes darted to Zaid, filled with panic. Zaid rose slowly, every inch is framed radiating authority. You will not touch her. Sir, with respect, the administrator interjected. Our hospital cannot harbor undocumented individuals. The law is clear. The law bends every day for men like me, Zaid snapped, his voice echoing through the room. Do not pretend it suddenly matters when a child's life is involved. Kareem stepped forward smoothly, his tone deceptively calm. Zaid, no one is questioning your compassion. But think of the company. Investors are unsettled. The board is demanding answers. If you fight this, you risk everything you built. Zaid's eyes locked onto his cousin's. Then maybe what I built wasn't worth it. The room went silent. The immigration officer cleared his throat. Mr. Al-Hakim, I'm giving you until tomorrow morning. If the woman and child are not transferred to a state facility, we will intervene. That is final. With that, the men filed out, leaving the heavy air behind them. Only Kareem lingered, his eyes cold. You're choosing strangers over family, over legacy. Don't make me clean up your ruin, cousin. He left before Zaid could answer. Amina's voice broke the silence. You can't fight them. They'll take her from me, and you'll lose everything. Zaid turned toward her, his face hard but his voice steady. I have more than everything when I'm here. Don't you see that? Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. You don't know me. You don't owe us this. I don't owe you, Zaid said softly, stepping closer. I choose you. For the first time, Amina's strength cracked. She covered her face with her hands, trembling. Zaid resisted the urge to reach out, to hold her. Instead, he stood there, letting her cry silently beside her daughter. Know his words across a line he could never step back from. That night, as the city glowed beyond the hospital windows, Zaid sat alone by the glass. His phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from board members, threats from journalists, calls from government contacts. He ignored them all. Instead, he watched Samira's small chest rise and fall, steady now, no longer ragged. And he thought of Amina's eyes when she whispered, She is all I have. He realized then that this wasn't just about saving a life. It was about defying a world that decided who mattered and who didn't. The following morning, Zaid walked into the hospital lobby flanked by reporters. Cameras flashed as questions erupted. Mr. Al-Hakim, will you comply with immigration? Are you endangering your company for this woman? Zaid stopped, his voice carrying the weight of steel. Listen carefully. This is not about business. This is not about politics. This is about a sick child who deserves to live. If protecting her makes me a villain in your eyes, then so be it. The lobby fell silent. The cameras whirred. For once, Zaid wasn't a polished executive delivering market forecasts. He was a man standing on a line he refused to cross. Back upstairs, Amina sat pale and trembling. What will happen now? She asked when he returned. Zaid placed a hand on the bedrail beside Samira. Now I fight for both of you. And though his voice was calm, inside he knew the truth. The fight would cost him. His company, his empire, even his family's trust. All could be torn from him. But when he looked at Samira's small fingers curled around her mother's hand, Zaid knew the cost didn't matter. For the first time in his life, he had found something worth losing everything for. The deadline came with the weight of inevitability. At sunrise, the immigration officers would return. The hospital board had already made their stance clear. Remove the woman and child or risk sanctions. For Zaid Al-Hakim, it was no longer just a question of charity. It was a test of everything he believed about himself, his legacy, and what it meant to have power. He hadn't slept. He spent the night in a chair by the window of Samira's hospital room, watching the first light creep over Dubai's skyline. Amina sat at the bedside, her hand never leaving her daughter's. Samira was stronger now. Her fever had broken, and her small breaths came steadier. The child's resilience was a silent defiance of chaos outside the walls. When Amina finally looked up, her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. They'll come today, she said softly. Zaid nodded. Let them. She shook her head, her voice trembling. You don't understand. They'll destroy you. Your company, your name, everything. Zaid leaned forward, his gaze steady. Then let them destroy it. If the price of keeping my empire is abandoning you, then it was never worth keeping. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, Amina saw not just a businessman in a tailored suit, but a man willing to stand alone against a machine larger than himself. By mid-morning, the tension broke. The hospital corridor filled with the echo of footsteps and the sharp voices of officials. A group of immigration officers approached the room, followed by administrators and, inevitably, journalists eager to capture the spectacle. The lead officer stepped inside. "Mr. Al-Hakim," he said formally, "time is over. This woman must be transferred now." Amina clutched Samira tightly, panic surging across her face. The child stirred, whimpering in confusion. Zaid rose to his full height, his presence filling the room like a force of nature. "She is not leaving," he said firmly. "Not today. Not ever." The officer's brow furrowed. "Sir, if you obstruct, you'll have to drag me out first." Zaid cut in. His voice was calm, but his tone carried finality that silenced the room. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered frantically, their pens scribbling. The world was watching. Kareem appeared at the doorway, his expression a mask of cold triumph. "Zaid," he said smoothly, "don't do this. Think of the shareholders. Think of our family name." Zaid turned to his cousin, his voice like steel. "For years I've thought of nothing else. And where did it bring me? Towers of glass and rooms filled with silence. But today I choose differently." He stepped closer to the officers, his gaze unflinching. "If you want them, you'll take me too. Arrest me. Make your headlines. But you will not tear a child from her mother while I still stand." The room erupted into chaos. Journalists shouted questions. Cameras clicked wildly, and hospital staff froze, unsure how to act. The officer exchanged tense glances with his team. Arresting a man of Zaid al-Hakim's stature was no small matter. It meant headlines, international attention, and political fallout. Finally, the officer lowered his voice. "This will not end here, Mr. al-Hakim. But for now, the child stays." He signaled his men, and they retreated, leaving the room buzzing with noise and tension. Amina collapsed into the chair, clutching Samira, tears streaming down her face. You stopped them," she whispered, her voice breaking. Zaid knelt beside her, his hand covering hers. "No, we stopped them, because you never gave up." In that moment, the world outside ceased to matter. It was not about wealth or reputation or legacy. It was about a man who had finally chosen to be human first. But the cost was immediate. By the evening, Kareem announced to the board that Zaid would step down as CEO. His empire, the one he had built from nothing, was no longer his. News channels broadcast it as a fall from grace, a cautionary tale. Yet, when Zaid walked out of the hospital that night with Amina and Samira by his side, he felt lighter than he ever had. The cameras swarmed, the questions flew, but for once he didn't care about the narrative. He wasn't playing to the market. He wasn't protecting his name. He was simply protecting them. Weeks later, Samira was discharged, her laughter filling the small apartment Zaid had arranged for them. Amina found work, honest work, her pride intact. And though the world continued to gossip about the billionaire who had thrown everything away for a homeless woman and her child, Zaid found peace in the simplest moments. Sharing meals, hearing Samira's laughter, watching Amina's strength transform from fear into hope. For the first time, he was not Zaid al-Hakim, the ruthless executive. He was Zaid, a man who had discovered that the true measure of power was not in what you owned, but in who you protected when no one else would. This is not just a story about wealth and power. It's a reminder that no empire, no fortune, no reputation can ever equal the value of compassion. Zaid al-Hakim lost everything the world told him mattered, but in doing so, he found something richer, purpose, connection, and a family he never expected. And now I ask you, how many times have you looked away, telling yourself it wasn't your responsibility? What would change in your life if just once you chose to stop and act? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because courage and compassion aren't the luxuries of the powerful. They are choices we all can make.